So over the past month or so, I've had the chance to test the Phantom 4 Pro Plus, and I've been really impressed with some of the things that it offers. All right, so the first thing I noticed when I opened this thing is the build quality. This is the first drone that I've really felt that actually feels solid. I think the bottom of this, there's actual aluminum on here. The build quality is a step above everything else. So the next thing I did was take it out for a sharpness comparison against my Mavic Pro. And at 200%, you can see that they're both similar in sharpness. If we move in a little bit closer, the Phantom 4 Pro looks to be a little sharper. And comparing the Phantom 4 Pro's 60 frames per second to its 24 frames per second, it looks like the 60 frames per second bends the image down instead of doing a full sensor readout, which results in the image being a little less sharp, but it's still very good looking. And the ability to shoot 4K at 60 frames a second is awesome. It's the first time I've been able to do any sort of slow-mo on a drone. I'm excited to test it out and shoot with it some more. All right, and for this dynamic range test, first thing I want to do is to see whether adjusting the contrast simply changed the recording range or if it actually got you more dynamic range. In the Phantom 4 Pro's case, all it does is really adjust the recording range, so I like to leave the contrast at -1 to keep you from recording in super whites. D-Log on the Phantom 4 Pro seems to get almost 2 stops of dynamic range extra compared to D-Cinelike. I'll show you some examples. So here we're looking at the D-Cinelike image that is exposed at 0 EV. Since we're exposing for here, notice how we clip the highlights in this window. And when I go to D-Log, that window comes back and we actually get a little bit more shadow detail as well. And once it's graded with the D-Log LUT, you can compare the two and see how much more dynamic range D-Log gives you. This is D-Cinelike, and what we've done here is exposed for the highlights. You can see that the shadows fall off very quickly in D-Cinelike, and now you see how much shadow detail we gain. And when comparing the log profiles on the Mavic Pro to the Phantom 4 Pro, the Phantom seems to have an extra stop of dynamic range. So the D-Log image looks great, but it does have a little bit of saturation clipping in the highlights. I use a custom LUT to correct the flat image and adjust for this extra saturation in the highlights. That brings me to the noise on the Phantom 4 Pro. It's a very clean image sensor. It's a 1-inch sensor, but because D-Log is locked at ISO 500, the noise starts to creep back in. It's not as noisy as the Mavic Pro, but if you're as picky as I am, you may want to apply some noise reduction. I like to apply the neat video profiles that I created with the team over there, but you can use whatever you want. For low light, this thing should be amazing. You can take it up to ISO 6400. It's very noisy right there, but I've been really impressed with what ISO 3200 looks like. And for reference, here's the Mavic at ISO 3200, and then here's the Phantom 4 Pro. You can see how much cleaner it is. And when we add a little bit of noise reduction, it looks great. Now when DJI sent this, I wasn't really excited about built-in screen. I didn't understand why I would want that. I have an iPhone, but I've really started to like this. And the reason is it makes things so much faster. It just pops up really quickly. I did a test to see how quickly I could get each one ready to fly. So I think I had the Phantom ready in 15 seconds and the Mavic was ready in 19 seconds. And the point is the setup time of both of these is very quick. You don't really have to consider that when making your choice. Another big difference is the adjustable aperture. I gave up using ND filters trying to maintain a 180-degree shutter on my Mavic. With this, put on an ND that gets you in the ballpark, change the aperture a little bit, and you can keep your cinematic shutter, no problem. Also, from doing some research, I found that the image sharpens up between f5.6 and 6.3. That seems to be the sweet spot of the aperture. But the biggest difference between these is obviously the size. If you're doing live event work and you're shooting mainly with Canon or Sony cameras, you gotta hold the camera in one hand, maybe you have a Ronin, and you've gotta bring the drone with you to a certain location. I really think the Mavic pulls ahead there with its size. We recently did a wedding in Mexico. We were having to take golf carts all around a resort, and I was holding on to a bunch of gear, and the Mavic was just over my shoulder. It was very easy. I couldn't have handled another piece of gear that had to be held by hand, and I couldn't have had a backpack. But for somebody who's doing drone-only videos, or maybe if you're doing more commercial work, I think this thing is perfect. And the one area where I had a little bit of issues with the Phantom was the image transmission. I feel like I can get a little more range out of the Mavic, which kind of surprised me. I think the Mavic just has a little bit newer technology. As I was finishing up this video, DJI released the Phantom 4 Pro 2.0. Now from what I can tell, everything is identical except for two things. It has OcuSync and also an updated prop design for lower noise. I don't know the technical details between OcuSync versus Lightbridge. All I can say is that from experience, OcuSync is much more sophisticated, has a better transmission range. So if you're thinking about getting a Phantom 4 Pro, I would certainly suggest going with a version 2.0. And that's really it. I think it's an amazing drone. I think it's the king of image quality without going to a larger drone like an Inspire or something even bigger. It feels like it matches my other 4K cameras really well. It doesn't feel artificial or digital at all. Hope that kind of helps you make a decision on whether the Phantom or the Mavic series is kind of better for you. I could actually see a place for both if you do event work and commercial work, or if you also want to have something small to carry around with you. And if you want to check out the LUT or the noise profiles that I created, they're in the description below. I'll have a lot more coming soon, so be sure to subscribe. And until next time, have fun.